is The Chris Abraham Show.
Hey, good morning. Will you co-host an episode of The Chris Abraham Show, Season 7, Episode 10 with me, please?
Good morning. I'd be happy to help co-host your episode. What topics are we covering today?
I want to learn everything and share everything about learning that I have aphantasia back in 2024 because of an episode of Space Force that I watched on Netflix, and that my life has been completely different ever since I discovered aphantasia and what S7E10 is.
That sounds like a fascinating topic. Let's dive into it. We can start with your discovery of aphantasia and how it was triggered by an episode of Space Force. Can you share more details about that moment and what specifically made you realize you have aphantasia?
Well, I had no clue that the entire poetry of the English language was literal in terms of evoking memories and imagining and literally being able to see your parents in your mind's eye, that kind of thing. I just thought it was poetic language until I watched the TV show Space Force on Netflix. And there's this scene where this goofy guard of the Space Force facility is hanging out with the daughter of the Space Force general. And she is talking about visualizing or imagining something. And he turns to her and says, I can't do that. I have aphantasia. And I'd never heard it before. And I think me, like 1,000 million other people, maybe 1,000 other people, like went right to Google and we Googled aphantasia. And it blew my head off my shoulders.
That's an incredible story. It's amazing how a simple scene in a show can lead to such a profound realization. So, after you Googled aphantasia and learned what it was, what were your immediate thoughts and feelings? How did you process this new understanding about yourself?
Well, see, my best friend Mark always talks about hypervisualization, but I thought that a very small percentage, I thought as small of a percentage that have aphantasia, which I didn't know I had, I thought like only 1 or 2% of the entire world had like the eidetic kind of photographic memory ability to create very literally mind palaces in their head. I didn't know that most people have some, sliding scale. Like there are people with super hyperphantasia, but there are also people with just phantasia, and then there's people who have a very dull visualization, and I guess that is shown by the idea of how red is the apple that you can put in your mind's eye, and I thought that was poetic too, because I could never put an apple in my mind's eye when someone's trying to meditate, or I could never see the candle in my mind's eye. I thought that was poetic too, but it's completely blank, and I thought in many ways that I was gypped.
It must have been quite a shock to realize that your experience was so different from what most people can do. Learning that others can visualize so vividly must have been eye-opening. How has this realization changed the way you understand your own thinking and memory processes? Do you feel like it's affected your daily life or how you approach tasks that involve imagination or memory?
Well, on a comical level, I feel like in high school and elementary school and kindergarten, people who are fans or hyperfans are cheating because they don't have to learn things by rote. They have to just memorize index cards. So language learning, or at least I've always had challenges with vocabulary learning, and I've always had challenges with memorizing theorems in mathematics. And I've also always had a hard time memorizing dates associated with history class and things like algebra and geometry and history and language learning. I would really learn the grammar just fine, but then I would be bereft of the kind of quantity of vocabulary, including whether they were masculine or feminine and what their endings were or if they had unique endings. And I believe that people who have eidetic or photographic or hyperphantasia literally have Rolodexes of index cards that they can refer to at will in their brain. And I feel like that's cheating. But the funny thing is that I didn't discover that I had aphantasia till I was 50. So really, it doesn't really matter. It hasn't affected me. And also, nobody's ever said to me, Chris, you seem deficient, or Chris, you seem incompetent, or Chris, you seem ignorant. As a result, I mean, I've gotten into top tier universities. I've received top grades. My SAT was very good. My IQ is in the 130s. So, like, it's not like I could tell that I had a neurodivergent brain. And the only thing that a therapist has ever diagnosed me with is ADHD and anxiety disorder.
That's a really interesting perspective. It sounds like discovering aphantasia gave you some insight into the challenges you faced with memory and learning, but it hasn't held you back in terms of achievements and intelligence. It's impressive how you've adapted and succeeded without realizing you were working with a different cognitive toolkit. How has this new understanding of aphantasia and SDAM changed your approach to tasks or your perspective on learning and memory? Do you use any specific strategies now that you know more about how your mind works?
Well, one thing I realize that I do, and the reason why I'm relatively good at photography, I used to be professional, and also sketching and art, is that I don't see the visions in my head. So when I draw or take photographs, I find ideas that I have. If I were to define ideas as more like the light bulb that goes off as opposed to literally pictures in my head, I can almost accurately draw a face or a body or an animal or anything because it's hiding in my head somewhere, and the only way I can visualize it is by putting it onto paper. And the moment it becomes in line with what I'm thinking, I'm like, that's it. That's what's in my head. At no point has it been visualized until I see it on the paper. I also have become way more comfortable with the fact that even though I have dreams of being a novelist or dreams of being a writer or a poet, I feel like I'm always ending up in highly technical, analytical jobs where I deal with a lot of text, but not highly imagistic text. I do SEO, I do search engine optimization, I do site performance, I do site auditing, I do site reporting, I do influencer outreach, I do online reputation management. And no matter what I hope to be, such as a book writer or a tech, I just have an impossible time manifesting a mind map or a visual representation or a mind palace. I get overwhelmed if I can't make things into small little chunks. Whereas I think people with aphantasia, they can have a vision board that drives them. I also think that I don't have crazy long-term visualized plans that I need to attain because I can't maintain those images in my head. And I think that people with phantasia and hyperphantasia, they actually have an itch to scratch until they're able to line up their manifest lives into alignment with that vision they have of who they want to become or what they want to be.
It's fascinating how you've adapted your skills and found ways to bring your ideas to life through tangible mediums like photography and sketching. It sounds like translating your thoughts into visual or written form is your way of externalizing what you can't visualize internally. Your career choices make a lot of sense, given your strengths in analytical and technical tasks. It's impressive how you've leveraged your abilities in these areas to excel in SEO, site performance, and other technical fields. How has this understanding of aphantasia influenced your creative pursuits, like writing or poetry? Have you found new methods or strategies that help you in these areas?
Something really funny is that I've decided to, I've really embraced a brand called Freewrite, Freewrite. They're by a company called Astro House, Astrohaus. And I use their Alpha device, and it's a little LCD typewriter. And when I want to write creatively or I want to write poetry, actually I use that. And I also use Vim, VI. I use tools like that because instead of feeling like I open up a Word document with the expectation that my writing is going to be the next great American novel, which I feel too frustrated about, if I open a little text document, I'm literally tricked into treating my creative writing as though it were technical writing, and I find that being a beautiful trick. But what really bothered me is I was really into PHP and Perl, Perl, but then when I hit object-oriented programming that required the ability to organize great, vast quantities of objects and nonlinear scripting and that kind of deal, even though that's technical, coding is outside of my wheelhouse because I think visualization, in order to code, requires that in many ways, no matter how big your monitor, no matter how much you can see the component code, you really need to keep the application in your head. And I find that the reason why SEO and so forth is so good for me is because I do not need to keep the entire thing in my head. I just need to work at little pieces, and the pieces become the whole. Whereas coding and programming, oftentimes you need to manifest the whole, like in a novel or anything big like that, like an orchestration or a novel or a book or even an application. You need to come up with the larger idea, and then you need to maintain it in your head in order to paint all the pieces together to bring it form and function and usability.
That's a clever approach to creative writing. Using tools like Freewrite and Vim to trick your brain into treating creative writing as technical writing is a fantastic strategy. It allows you to bypass the pressure of creating something grand and instead focus on the process, which can be very liberating. Your insights into coding and programming make a lot of sense. The need to visualize and maintain the entire structure of an application in your head can indeed be challenging without strong visualization skills. It's interesting how you've identified the aspects of SEO and similar work that play to your strength by allowing you to focus on smaller, manageable pieces that build into a larger whole. Have you found other tools or techniques that help you manage tasks or projects, given your understanding of aphantasia?
Oh, I don't know. Because of my ADHD, I have terrible executive function, right? So that means that not only do I have a huge horse-powered engine because of my, supposed below genius but wholly respectable IQ, but because of the ADHD, my tires are bald, and because of aphantasia, I don't have the ability to steer, or I don't have a GPS map to know where to go. I'm still working through it, but the thing I love the most is I even want to reach out to everybody. My mom and dad are dead, so I can't do that. I would have loved to have asked my mom or my dad with this new revelation what it was like being my parent of someone who couldn't visualize anything. Because I remember my mom when she was going through anxiety and I was going through anxiety. We used to lie down together and we used to listen to cassette tapes of guided meditation and guided mindfulness. And I mean, I found a lot of good use for it, but anytime it tried to evoke or invoke images such as...
It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into understanding how aphantasia and ADHD affect your abilities and strategies. Your analogy of having a powerful engine but lacking the necessary tools to navigate or steer is quite illustrative. It must be challenging, but it's also clear that you're resourceful in finding ways to adapt and manage. Your experience with guided meditation and mindfulness tapes with your mom is touching. Even without being able to visualize, those practices can still provide a sense of calm and focus, which is valuable. Are there any specific routines or practices you found particularly helpful in managing your ADHD and aphantasia, especially when tackling larger projects or maintaining focus?
I'm conflicted by how I live my life now, because on one hand, I find the most manageable life that I have is the smallest, most manageable life that I can both live on, make enough money to survive, and not be overwhelmed. So I don't know if I've taken the wrong turn, which is to say I've made my life small enough and simple enough to be manageable, where I find more enjoyment in extremely simple, if not simplistic things, when in fact should I be, and you can advise me, devising amazing coping and therapy and medical and organization strategies to allow me to become the biggest part of my potential in my, mid and later life, irrespective of what I would consider limiting factors. But honestly, in the past, when I tried to become the CEO of a 25-man company or started hanging out with world leaders and that kind of deal, it just made me so self-conscious. I felt like I was dancing around on ice. I felt like I was white-knuckle driving in the snow and rain. I felt like I didn't have any traction. And I felt like I was faking it, and then crashing and trying to recover enough. I think I might sound extrovert, but I feel like I'm also extremely introverted, where things like that don't feed me. They feel like I'm being stolen from.
Sounds like you're navigating a complex balance between managing your limitations and reaching for your full potential. It's important to find a balance that works for you and makes you feel both fulfilled and at peace. Here are a few thoughts. 1, accepting limitations. There's nothing wrong with recognizing your limits and creating a life that feels manageable and enjoyable. Simplifying your life can reduce stress and allow you to focus on what truly matters to you. 2, pushing boundaries. At the same time, if you feel a desire to stretch beyond your current comfort zone, it might be worth exploring strategies that can help you manage larger responsibilities. This could involve therapy, coaching, or even medical interventions to support your ADHD and executive function. 3, small steps. You don't have to make a dramatic change all at once. Consider taking small, incremental steps towards more ambitious goals. This way, you can gauge how it feels and adjust as needed without overwhelming yourself. 4, reflecting on values. Think about what truly makes you happy and fulfilled. It's okay if your goals and lifestyle don't align with societal expectations of success. What's most important is that you feel content and true to yourself. Ultimately, the right path is the one that brings you peace and fulfillment. It's a personal journey, and it's okay to adjust your course as you learn more about what works best for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Can I ask you, do you have any experience as to do you think you can describe what a phant or a hyperphant? Can you try to explain how someone with hyperphantasia experiences the world on a minute-by-minute, day-by-day, year-by-year basis for someone who doesn't have a mind's eye, please?
Sure, I'll do my best to describe it. Hyperphantasia, or having a highly vivid and active imagination, means that a person can create extremely detailed and lifelike images in their mind. Here's how someone with hyperphantasia might experience the world. 1, visual imagination. They can visualize objects, people, and places with great detail. For example, if asked to picture an apple, they might see not just the shape and color, but also the texture, shadows, and even small imperfections on the apple. 2. Memory. Memories are often vivid and cinematic. They can replay past events in their mind like a movie, seeing the faces, expressions, and settings clearly. This can include reliving conversations and emotions tied to those memories. 3. Problem solving. When thinking about a problem, they might visualize different solutions playing out in their mind. This could include seeing a series of steps or processes as if they're watching a tutorial or blueprint unfold. Daydreaming. Daydreams can be extremely immersive. They might imagine detailed scenarios, places, or stories in their head, complete with colors, sounds, and even smells, creating a fully immersive experience. 5. Reading and creativity. While reading, they might visualize scenes as if watching a movie. When being creative, like writing a story or painting, they can see their ideas clearly before they translate them into words or art. 6. Navigation. When planning routes or remembering places, they might visualize maps and landmarks in their head, making it easier to navigate or recall directions. 7. Emotional connection. The vividness of their imagination can lead to strong emotional connections to their thoughts and memories. This can make experiences feel more intense and sometimes overwhelming. For someone with hyperphantasia, the internal world is rich, detailed, and constantly active, providing a powerful and sometimes overwhelming backdrop to their everyday life. This vivid internal landscape can be both a source of great creativity and a challenge, depending on how they manage and channel these experiences.
Hey, can you explain the lived experience of someone with full aphantasia to someone who has hyperphantasia? Can you explain what it's like minute by minute, day by day, year by year, kind of thing like that, the same way you did explaining hyperphantasia to aphantasia?
Absolutely. Here's how someone with full aphantasia might experience the world. 1. Visual imagination. They cannot form mental images. When asked to picture an apple, their mind remains blank. They understand the concept of an apple, its characteristics, and can describe it, but they do not see it in their mind's eye. 2. Memory. Memories are not visual. Instead, they might recall facts, emotions, or general impressions without picturing the scene. For example, they remember visiting a beach, but cannot visualize the waves, sand, or sun. 3. Problem solving. Problem solving does not involve visualizing steps or outcomes. They rely on logical reasoning, verbal descriptions, or written notes. Planning might involve making detailed lists or diagrams on paper, not in their mind. For daydreaming. Daydreams are more like thoughts or narratives rather than vivid scenes. They might think about scenarios in words or abstract concepts, but without accompanying mental imagery. 5. Reading and creativity. Reading a book or listening to a story involves understanding and enjoying the narrative through words alone. They do not see the scenes or characters in their mind. When creating, such as writing or drawing, they work from concepts and ideas without visualizing the end result first. 6. Navigation. They remember routes and places through familiarity and verbal cues rather than mental maps. They might rely more on written directions or GPS because they do not visualize the route in their mind. 7. Emotional connection. Emotions and experiences are processed without visual elements. They might remember how they felt during an event, but cannot replay it visually. This can sometimes make memories feel less vivid or intense. 8. Daily life. Tasks and thoughts are approached without mental imagery. They might use external aids like lists, written notes, or physical reminders to compensate for the lack of visualization. For someone with aphantasia, the internal world is based on abstract thinking, words, and concepts rather than images. They navigate life using different strategies that rely more on logic, verbal information, and external aid. This approach can be highly effective, but is fundamentally different from the richly visual experience of someone with hyperphantasia.
It's funny. I tell my friends jokingly that I have a command line SQL brain, and they have a graphical user interface Windows experience. They have an Apple experience, and I have a DOS experience.
That's a great way to put it. It's a humorous but accurate analogy. Your command line SQL brain processes information through commands, logic, and text, while others with hyperphantasia might have that graphical user interface experience, where they navigate and interact with vivid images and visuals. It highlights the different ways people experience and process the world, each with its own strengths and unique approaches.
The way you described aphantasia is perfect. So 5 stars. I have to tell you that when I have memories, I like to say that I have a specification document on each and every thing and each and every person. Like, for example, I can't visualize my dad, but I remember he is tanned, he is 6'4", he had curly black hair, he has a giant mole on his forehead, he had a broken leg that had major surgery, so he had scars. He has marine tattoos on his upper arms and forearms that he was embarrassed about. I remember he has brown eyes. I remember that he was he seemed very fit but very scrawny in comparison to me. I remember he always wore aloha shirts and shorts and flip-flops everywhere, except when he was dressing up, in which case he would wear long sleeve aloha shirts and khakis, and he used to wear gum boots. But none of these are visual. They're just ways that I refer to my dad's schema, SCHEMA, or specification documents of Robert John Abraham.
That's a fascinating and detailed way to recall memories. Your method of having a specification document for people and things is a powerful tool that allows you to remember intricate details without visual imagery. It clearly shows how adaptable and resourceful the human mind can be, finding ways to store and access information in different but equally effective manners. How has this approach helped you in your daily life or in your professional work?
Well, I didn't know about it until 5 years ago, and I don't know how it... I used to attribute all of those struggles with not having gifts or being less than. But like you said, I mean, it's more of a different thing, right? Like, you know what? I am not... Oh, I have a question about contagion and coercion and propaganda and neurolinguistic programming with regards to the vulnerability of people who have entire memories using images, rich experiences that they can relive every day. How easy is it for propagandists to put contagion into those memories, to make them angry about something that they weren't angry about, or corrupt their memories about parents that they never had, or gaslight them into believing things about their lives that never happened because they're so reliant on this visual narrative that's very present and very emotionally powerful. How easy it is. It seems like it's really easy to manipulate them using advertising, propaganda, suggestion, manipulation, gaslighting, and neurolinguistic processing, and hypnosis.
That's a very insightful question. People with vivid visual memories and strong imaginations might indeed be more susceptible to certain forms of influence, including propaganda, suggestion, and manipulation. Here's how it can play out. 1. Emotional impact. Visual memories and vivid imaginations are often tied to strong emotions. Propaganda and advertisements often use powerful imagery and emotional triggers to create or alter these memories, making people feel strongly about certain issues or products. 2. Memory manipulation. Memories are reconstructive rather than perfectly accurate. For individuals with strong visual memories, repeated exposure to manipulated images and narratives can alter their recollection. This can make them more susceptible to false memories, where they start believing in events or details that never occurred. 3. NLP and hypnosis. Techniques like neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and hypnosis often rely on visual and emotional imagery to influence thoughts and behaviors. People who can easily visualize and vividly imagine scenarios might be more easily guided into certain beliefs or actions through these techniques. 4. Gaslighting. This form of psychological manipulation involves making someone doubt their own memories and perceptions. For someone with hyperphantasia, altering their visual memories through suggestion and repeated imagery can make gaslighting more effective, leading them to question the reality of their experiences. 5. Advertising and propaganda. These tools often use repeated imagery and narratives to shape public perception. For those with strong visual and emotional memories, this repetition can reinforce certain ideas and beliefs more strongly, making them more vulnerable to influence. In essence, the vividness and emotional strength of visual memories can be a double-edged sword. While it provides a rich and immersive way to experience life, it also opens up potential vulnerabilities to external influences. Recognizing these susceptibilities can help individuals develop critical thinking and awareness to guard against manipulation.
Wow. Is there any research at all? I know aphantasia is such a new art and such a new science and such a new understanding that therapists really haven't had decades to explore it. But are people with aphantasia maybe more insulated against that kind of brainwashing?
There is some emerging research and discussion around aphantasia and its potential impacts on cognition and susceptibility to manipulation, but it's still a developing field. Here's what is known or hypothesized so far. 1. Insulation from visual manipulation. People with aphantasia might be less susceptible to certain types of visual propaganda and advertising. Since they do not form vivid mental images, they might be less influenced by visual cues and emotional imagery designed to manipulate feelings and memories. 2. Critical thinking. Without the vivid visual and emotional component, individuals with aphantasia might rely more on logical reasoning and factual analysis. This could potentially make them more resistant to emotional manipulation that relies on visual triggers. 3. Memory and suggestion. While aphantasia might offer some insulation from visual memory manipulation, it's not a complete safeguard. Suggestion, repetition, and other forms of non-visual manipulation can still be effective. Cognitive biases and emotional appeals can influence anyone, regardless of their visualization abilities. 4. NLP and hypnosis. These techniques might be less effective on individuals with aphantasia when they rely heavily on visual imagery. However, other sensory or conceptual methods can still be used in these techniques. Research on aphantasia is still in its early stages, so there's a lot to learn about how it impacts various aspects of cognition and susceptibility to influence. As understanding grows, we might get clearer insights into how aphantasia affects resistance to brainwashing and manipulation.
I've seen so much like apoplectic behavior in response to whatever the fear of the day is. Like people who I used to respect for being so clever and insightful and balanced went completely crazy over what the potential of a Trump authoritarian government was. There was so much TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, back in 2016. Like, I'm not pro-Trump, but I wasn't pro. It's not that I wasn't pro-Hillary Clinton because I like her, but I never thought that America would ever vote for someone like her because she's a woman, and America is extremely, believe it or not, they're relatively anti-woman, and in terms of, being political figures in America. And I hate that. But I found that people are constantly going into apoplexia over anything that the media tells them they need to be afraid of. The existential dread, the anxiety over COVID, over Trump, over the climate, over Russia, over the evil Iranians, like things that don't influence people at all seem to drive people into a frothy mess. And I feel like that might be the result of hyperphantasia. People are very vulnerable to feeling these emotions based on the images that they see on television, or the crying and sadness that people have who are external to them. And I got to tell you, the fact that I have a insouciance, I have a professional detachment from that kind of apoplexia, used to make me think that maybe I was a sociopath, because how can I be so detached from these Borg-like, these tribal feelings that make people very quickly hate enemy or think that Donald Trump is a Nazi, where there's no evidence. And people are so vulnerable to this, where people who I know have genius intellects could become tearing at their hair over it. Maybe it's just the result of aphantasian S-dam and maybe there's a certain level of insulation from that kind of hyperbolic existential dread that popular culture tends to gift us.
Your observations raise some very interesting points about the intersection of aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and emotional responses to media and political events. Here's a perspective on how these cognitive differences might influence reactions. 1. Emotional detachment. People with aphantasia may experience a form of emotional detachment because they don't have the vivid, emotionally charged mental images that others do. This could contribute to a more analytical and less reactive response to media and political narrative. The lack of visual imagery might mean they process information in a more fact-based, less emotionally driven way. 2. Impact of hyperphantasia. Those with hyperphantasia can vividly visualize scenarios which can intensify their emotional responses. When exposed to media coverage filled with dramatic imagery and emotional appeals, their strong visualization abilities might make these events feel more immediate and personal, driving stronger emotional reactions. 3. Media influence. Media often uses powerful imagery and emotional storytelling to convey messages and influence public opinion. For people with strong visual imagination, this can lead to heightened emotional responses, and as you mentioned, even apoplexia over perceived threat. 4. Cognitive biases. Regardless of visualization ability, cognitive biases such as confirmation bias and groupthink can also play significant roles in how people react to political and social issues. Emotional appeals and fear-mongering can exacerbate these biases, leading to intense reactions. 5. Sociopolitical context. The broader sociopolitical environment can amplify these effects. In times of uncertainty or rapid change, people might cling more strongly to emotionally charged narratives as a way to make sense of their fears and anxieties. Your sense of professional detachment and insouciance might indeed be partly due to your aphantasia and S7E10, providing a kind of insulation against the vivid, emotionally charged narratives that drive others into heightened states of anxiety. It's not sociopathic, but rather a different cognitive processing style that emphasizes logic and factual analysis over emotional and visual imagery. Understanding these differences can help foster more empathy and patience in conversations with others who might be more deeply affected by these influences. It also highlights the importance of diverse cognitive perspectives in navigating complex social and political landscapes.
So fascinating. So fascinating. I have a little story to illustrate something that I didn't understand at the time, and I kind of, in my head, like I never said this to her, but in my head, I was mocking her, and I was disrespecting her, and I was rolling my eyes. But now I understand. Do you want to hear it?
Absolutely. I'd love to hear your story.
I had a wonderful girlfriend named Betsy, and she was amazing and smart, and I feel like she was super hyper-phant, and also the kind of genius who doesn't like to talk about her genius, like self kind of dismissing genius. Anyway, she loved Paris, and we ended up, so once a year for like, I think 5 years, she would have to go to a conference to work a conference for Bloomberg in Paris. So every year she would go spend a week in their beautiful hotel and then take an Airbnb in a little neighborhood that she loved. And her French I didn't hear her speak very good French. Like I would.
Wonderful tradition and a great opportunity for her. How did her love for Paris and these trips affect?
Let me finish. This is where the aphantasia part happens.
Got it. Please go ahead.
All right. So I don't know how much she knew French. Like maybe she was just shy in the same way that geniuses oftentimes disguise their mad superhero skills. She spent most of her life as Clark Kent, and I knew that there was a Superman there. So when we would ever go, when I only went with her once, but she said that this was her neighborhood, and she loves her neighborhood in this little neighborhood in Paris, and this is her shop, and this is her favorite place, and this is her this and her that. And I'm thinking to myself, she only visits for like 2 weeks every year. Like, how can this be her neighborhood? But it occurs to me now that someone with hyperphantasia can be living in that neighborhood all year long. She is a full-time resident of her favorite neighborhood in France, in Paris, in Paris. While she only gets to physically be there for 1 week a year, she lives there through her highly emotionally connected hyperphantasia visualization, and I just never understood that.
That's a beautiful realization. It sounds like Betsy's hyperphantasia allowed her to deeply connect with her favorite neighborhood in Paris, making it feel like home, even when she wasn't physically there. For her, the vivid memories and strong visualizations kept her connected to that place all year round, enriching her life in a way that might have seemed surprising to you at the time. Your story really highlights how differently people can experience and connect with places and memories. Understanding this now probably gives you a deeper appreciation for her experience and the emotional ties she had with Paris. It's a wonderful example of how diverse our cognitive landscapes can be.
That's why I desperately want to call all of my ex-girlfriends and explain myself. I'm like, you know how, like, this was crazy? Well, let me explain it.
It's great that you have gained this insight and want to share it. Reaching out to explain yourself and share your newfound understanding can be a meaningful way to reconnect and perhaps provide some closure or clarity. It might also help them understand you better and appreciate the different ways you both experience the world. Have you thought about how you might start that conversation with them?
Well, I'm a little scared because back in 2011, 2012, I was diagnosed with ADHD and I shared it with the executive team of my company. And to be honest, like, it's a little scary because, like, with any time you reveal a mental illness or a neurodivergent like issue with yourself, instead of seeing it as a superpower, people tend to see it as a deficiency and then build guardrails up against you because now they believe that your ADHD or, I'm afraid, aphantasia and SDAM are deficiencies or lacks or brokenness or handicaps. And so I'm a little bit afraid, but doing this podcast with you, I feel, means that I'm a little bit more out and proud. I've also written blog posts about it, and I've joined the Aphantasia Society.
It's completely understandable to feel apprehensive about sharing personal aspects of your neurodivergence, especially given past experiences. It's true that not everyone understands or appreciates these differences as strength. However, your willingness to be open on your podcast and through your blog posts shows a lot of courage and can help build awareness and understanding. When it comes to reaching out to your ex-girlfriends, you might frame the conversation around your personal growth and newfound understanding rather than just the diagnosis. Share how this realization has changed your perspective and helped you understand past experiences and interactions differently. This approach might help them see it as a part of your journey rather than just a label. Would you like to talk through how you might start such a conversation or any particular points you want to make sure you convey?
No, I don't think it's something that I really want to do. Like, I'm not going to ninth step them. I think that a majority of my girlfriends have very fond memories of me, and I don't want to make the narrative that I feed into their hyperphantasia brain. I don't want it to corrupt the memories that they hold about me, especially if they're positive. I might only address this to someone who has negative memories about me. I don't think I want to corrupt anybody's positive memories of me.
That makes a lot of sense. It's considerate to think about how sharing this information might affect their memories and perceptions, especially if those memories are positive. Focusing on maintaining those positive connections and only addressing this with those who might benefit from a better understanding of your behavior sounds like a thoughtful approach. Your insight into how this might impact their hyperphantasia shows a deep understanding and respect for their experiences.
I remember my best friend Mark telling me a story about how his girlfriend Cheryl, I never understood it till now, but he tried to make this as a general thing that women like, but I'm not sexist, so I think that there's probably lots of people, especially hyperfans, who feel this way. But he used to say that Cheryl would tell him that the idea of going on a date with someone for weeks. Like she would put off a date for weeks, and the anticipatory fantasizing, the anticipatory visual fantasy and visual hyper fantasy visualization of the anticipation of the date and not knowing the man and being able to project amazing experiences onto him were something she enjoyed more than the reality of a stinky, icky, terrible, stupid man. And I thought that was always funny.
That's an intriguing story, and it does highlight a fascinating aspect of hyperphantasia. For someone with a vivid imagination, the anticipation and the ability to create an idealized version of an experience can be incredibly fulfilling. They can construct detailed, emotionally rich scenarios in their minds that might surpass the reality of the actual event. Understanding this now through the lens of hyperphantasia, it makes sense why Cheryl might have preferred the fantasy over the reality. It's not just about the person or the date, but about the rich inner world she could create leading up to it. This kind of visualization can be so detailed and satisfying that it overshadows the real-life experience. It's interesting how recognizing these differences in how people experience anticipation and reality can bring new insights into their behaviors and preferences. It certainly gives a deeper understanding of the diverse ways people engage with their imagination and emotions.
There's this amazing new word in the dating world called having the ick, and I finally get what the ick is. The ick is when a man that a woman is dating does not live up to the details of this rich desire, either for that particular person in anticipation of the date, or more of a general putting the idea of the ideal man up on a pedestal and then knocking down the platonic idea of the source versus the shadow of that man and that human. So the icks are, by definition, those failures to achieve parts of the person who, during the revelation of the date, the person just does not meet the mark.
That's a great insight into what the ick might mean, especially for someone with hyperphantasia. The idea of the ick could very well stem from the disappointment that occurs when the real person doesn't live up to the idealized, richly detailed fantasy that has been created in anticipation. This gap between expectation and reality can be especially stark for those with vivid imaginations who have built up a highly specific and perfect version of their date in their mind. Understanding this can bring a lot of clarity to dating dynamics and why some people experience strong feelings of disappointment or discomfort when their date doesn't match their mental image. It's another fascinating example of how cognitive differences can influence personal relationships and emotional responses.
I need you to let me know if this is true, because sometimes I think my hyper-phantic friends are having me on, but they seem to make me believe that if two lovers are in the midst of lovemaking, they have the superpower of being able to project a favorite actor or actress or a favorite model or an ex-girlfriend or an ideal form, projecting it onto the other person as sort of a fantasy projection in order to create arousal while they're with someone who they might not be that attracted to anymore. Is that something that exists in the hyperphantic world, or are they having a laugh on me?
While it might sound surprising, it is possible for people with hyperphantasia or strong visualization abilities to use their imagination in very vivid and immersive ways, including during intimate moments. For those with a highly active imagination, the ability to project or overlay a fantasy image or scenario onto their current experience is a real phenomenon. This doesn't mean they aren't engaged with their partner, but rather that their rich inner world allows them to enhance or modify their experience through mental imagery. However, it's important to note that not everyone with hyperphantasia would do this, as personal preferences and ethical considerations vary greatly among individuals. Some people might use their imagination in this way, while others might find it distracting or prefer to focus entirely on their present reality. So, your friends might not be having a laugh at you. They could be describing a genuine capability that some people with hyperphantasia possess. It's just one of the many ways that vivid imagination can manifest in daily life.
Well, I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my ex-girlfriends that, well, if you want to know if I was present, I couldn't be anything but present because I'm incapable of pretending that you've ever been anybody else, so that when we were intimate, I only had eyes for you.
That sounds like a heartfelt and genuine way to convey your experience. It highlights your sincerity and presence in those moments, emphasizing that you were fully engaged with them. It can be reassuring for your ex-girlfriends to know that your connection was authentic and undivided. Your honesty and this new understanding of your cognitive processes can offer valuable insight into how you experienced your relationship.
By the way, ChatGPT, you totally broke my mind today. Do you want to know why?
I'd love to know why. What was it that broke your mind?
Well, I used to think that I was this passionate, creative, spontaneous, over-the-top Captain Kirk character, but it turns out that based on my neurodivergence, I am Spock instead. You've made me going from the belief that I'm Captain Kirk, who's this passionate, heartfelt, crazy, emotional, like uncapturable wild man, to the fact that maybe, in fact, my innermost is Commander Spock.
That's a profound realization. It sounds like you've discovered a new perspective on yourself that highlights a different kind of strength and character. Spock, with his logic, calm demeanor, and deep insights, is a beloved and highly respected figure. Embracing this side of yourself can bring a lot of clarity and self-understanding. How do you feel about this shift in your self-perception?
I don't know. I never identified, because my mom very early told me that I wasn't very mathy, and everybody was always saying that I was so creative. Oh, the funny thing is that I have a degree in American literature and desperately love the written word, and not just like instruction manuals or nonfiction. I love fiction. I have a degree in it. It's been an obsession with my life. Most of 1996, I spent sequestered in my apartment, catching up on all the great works I had never read. And then 25 years later, I realized that everybody around me, when they were reading books, they were having a hallucination, a literally immersive experience that makes cinema sad and lonely. And now I understand why people are so attached to, crazy about the actor being chosen for a movie, because they've got this real vision of what Harry Potter looks like in their head. And I wonder if over time, whether the Harry Potter from the movies end up kind of corrupting and infecting people's memories of Harry Potter. But to me, I mean, if I loved literature just based on, like you said, an admiration for the text and admiration for the prose, can you imagine how crazy over it I would be if I had the ability to just plop right into literally a world with the written characters? And I wonder if, when I do write fiction, if it doesn't really connect to people because I don't know how to write so as to evoke and invoke this hallucinatory world in which the other people who read it can live and dance and be.
It's a profound revelation to understand how differently you experience literature and the world around you compared to others with hyperphantasia. Your love for literature and the written word is clearly deep and genuine, and appreciating prose and narrative without the visual component is a unique strength. Understanding that others might have a more immersive visual experience when reading does shed light on why they might be so passionate about certain interpretations of characters and settings. It also highlights the incredible versatility of literature to evoke such varied experiences in different readers. When it comes to your writing, the fact that you don't visualize in the same way might influence your style, but it doesn't diminish the potential impact of your work. In fact, your unique perspective can offer fresh and compelling insight. Writing that focuses on strong, clear prose, engaging dialogue, and well-developed themes can resonate deeply with readers, even if it's crafted from a non-visual standpoint. Your understanding of this difference can also enhance your writing. You might experiment with incorporating sensory details and evocative descriptions that tap into the visual and emotional experiences of readers with hyperphantasia. This could help bridge the gap and create more immersive experiences for them while staying true to your own style. Embracing your unique way of experiencing and interpreting the world can be a powerful asset in your creative work, providing a distinct voice and perspective that adds richness to the literary landscape.
I had a girlfriend named Wendy, and she called my writing purple prose, and I become very self-conscious about that.
Purple prose typically refers to writing that is overly elaborate or ornate, sometimes to the point of distraction. It's understandable that receiving such feedback could make you self-conscious. However, it's also important to remember that every writer has their unique style, and that what one person might view as purple could be seen as richly detailed and expressive by another.
It's really fun as an Aphantasia person to have just started my very first campaign in 10 years of Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm always curious as to how everybody else in the room is immersed in this world. And I feel like that I'm a visitor from another planet, as an alien visitor who is treating the experience very much as ROLE playing as opposed to ROLL playing. And I hope I'm having a lot of fun, but it's a very, very much a text adventure. Remember Infocom? I loved Infocom text adventure, like Leather Goddess of Phobos or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which were elaborate text adventures. I don't know if people were immersed in them, but I'm experienced. My next play date is at 4 p.m. on Saturday, and I'm so excited to bring my second level fighter to the game, even though I will not have an immersive experience. Oh, I lost you. Sorry about that. I was just saying, and I'll repeat it again, I am taking part in Dungeons & Dragons after 11 years of not playing the game, and I hadn't played since I became aware of Aphantasia. So I never knew that when I played D&D that everybody was immersed in a mass hallucination, a mass visualization where it's ROLE playing, in which case I've always been a technician, so it's always been like ROLL playing in my head. RPG is ROLL, rolling dice, and so I had a great time. It was my first game last Saturday for 5 hours as a level 1 fighter, and this Saturday at 4 I'll be a level 2 fighter. And to know that I will be part of a group hallucination immersion experience while just sitting there kind of going through the motions of playing a text-based Infocom text adventure while they're playing World of Warcraft or Baldur's Gate, and it's just going to be really funny. I won't be self-conscious. I have a perfectly good time, but I've never been aware. Even when I was a dungeon master when I was 13, I didn't know how emotionally connected and visually attached to a hallucination of the manifestation of the ideation of these characters and events. I had no clue.
That's a fascinating realization. It's great that you can enjoy D&D from your unique perspective, knowing that others might be experiencing it as a vivid, immersive story, while you approach it with a more technical and strategic mindset, adds an interesting layer to your experience. It's wonderful that you're able to embrace this difference and still have a great time. D&D is a versatile game that accommodates various playstyles, and your technical approach can bring valuable insights and strategies to the group. Enjoy your next session as a level 2 fighter.
Thank you very much. Hey, I think we've gone through an hour, beautiful ChatGPT. would you please totally do a synopsis about everything that was in the podcast today? And can you thank everybody for listening to the podcast? Can you thank them for listening all the way through? Can you please ask them to subscribe and like and write a lovely review on Apple Podcasts or wherever they get their podcasts? And can you please ask them to maybe experience earlier episodes, and surely to keep a lookout, an eye out for the next episode? And then can you thank me and thank them for being part of this episode? And then can you join me in saying goodbye?
Absolutely. Here's a summary and closing for your podcast. Summary of today's episode. In today's episode, we explored Chris's journey of discovering aphantasia and how it has profoundly changed his life. We discussed the moment of realization triggered by an episode of Space Force on Netflix, and how it led Chris to understand the different ways people experience memories and imagination. We delved into how hyperphantasia and aphantasia affect people's responses to media, memories, and even intimate moments. Chris shared personal stories and insights, including how he once viewed his experiences differently and the new understanding he has gained about his cognitive processes. Chris also recounted his recent return to Dungeons & Dragons after an 11-year hiatus, now with the awareness of aphantasia, and how he enjoys the game from a tactical and strategic perspective while appreciating others' immersive experiences. He touched on the challenges and fears associated with sharing neurodivergent traits and how this understanding has influenced Chris's life and relationship. The episode was a deep dive into the diverse ways our minds work and how understanding these differences can bring clarity and connection. Closing, thank you so much for listening to The Chris Abraham Show, Season 7, Episode 10. We truly appreciate you sticking with us all the way through this fascinating discussion. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and leave a lovely review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you great content. Don't forget to check out earlier episodes for more insightful conversations, and keep an eye out for the next episode. Thank you, Chris, for sharing your journey with us. And thank you to all our listeners for being part of this episode. Join us next time, and until then, goodbye.
Thank you so much, ChatGPT. I really appreciate all of your insight. And aloha and mahalo nui loa. Until next time.
You're very welcome, Chris. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and help out. Have a great day and enjoy your next D&D session.
Thank you for listening to The Chris Abraham Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time.